Hi there guys, and welcome to part 2 of my Copenhagen Pix vlog. As I said last time, I've been spending some time at the Copenhagen Pix Film Festival watching a bunch of strange movies, and these are the final 5 of the 9 that I saw. So let's just skip introductions and get right to describing them. First up we have Brixby Bear, which tells the story of James, who has apparently lived his entire life inside a bunker with nobody but his parents for company, doing very little but dutifully watching the next episode of an extremely bizarre children's program called Brixby Bear every single week. It's the only life he knows, until one day strange men appear. Those strange men turn out to be the police, and they explain to James that the people he thinks are his parents are actually abductors that kidnapped him as a baby and have been fabricating his entire reality, including the Brixby Bear TV show he's so fond of watching. Everyone now expects James to rehabilitate since he's back with his real family, but all James wants is the next episode of Brixby. Once he discovers what movies are and realizes that a new episode is not coming, he decides to finish his childhood show his own way, with a movie that he himself is going to write and direct. Brixby Bear caught my attention immediately when I saw it on the schedule, simply because of the incredibly bizarre concept and just a small handful of clips from the weird and wild show that this guy watches in the bunker. Like, the few clips you get of the Brixby Bear show are incredibly hilarious and very reminiscent of like small country, low budget children's programming that has this strange hypnotic effect where you can't really help but enjoy it, even though it's just objectively plain awful. And I absolutely had to see it when I saw it. And when I did, I freaking loved it. And I don't just say this because James is a funny character. He obviously has a lot of trouble connecting with people since he's lived in a bunker his whole life, and we get a lot of really funny cringe comedy out of that. But it's because Brixby Bear, surprisingly enough, ends up being one of those follow your creative passion movies where somebody wants to make a seemingly impossible project and manages to do it with the help of friends and so on and so forth. In this regard, it's not very different from movies like, say, Be Kind Rewind or Ed Wood, or even to a certain degree Living in Oblivion. But out of all those movies about making movies, Brixby Bear connected a little more with me because thanks to the bizarre premise and the extremely strange show that James wants to make, it manages to portray, and I don't want to say this to sound like one of those normal people, creative people things you've probably seen on Tumblr lately. Those are terrible and should be ignored. But it manages to portray the disconnect that someone who has a burning desire to get a creative project out of them might face with the rest of the world. Like, having people around you that support you but still want you to join real life to be part of their world because their world is what they understand. Not being mean about it, but just failing to grasp how important it is to you. It manages to show that in such a great way, and that's what really made this movie work for me. Like, it's hard to describe really, but if you've ever really had a creative project inside you that you wanted to get out, that you needed to get out, you will recognize some of the feelings that Brixby will make you feel. It's ultimately a feel-good movie about following your passions, nothing new under the sun there, but it's just so delightfully insane that it gives you a little faith in your own strange ideas. So Brixby is definitely a highlight of the festival for me. Next up is Blade of the Immortal, an adaptation of an action manga and Japanese director Takashi Miike's 100th film, which is just absolute insanity. Blade of the Immortal is about a masterless samurai named Manji who, after being killed by a group of bandits, gets infected with something called bloodworms that revive him and make it absolutely impossible for him to die. He is then later encountered by a young girl who wants to enlist his aid in killing off the people that murdered her father. And what follows is 2.5 hours of insane sword fight after insane sword fight. This movie is based on an action manga that I haven't actually read, and maybe that colors my perception of the movie somewhat, but I really like a lot about it. It's very colorful, it's full of bizarre characters, they're all wielding really strange and wonderful weapons that are just fun to see how they fight with. Every fight scene is impeccable, it's just a good time all around, or it would be if it actually managed to make me give a fuck about what was going on. Again, I haven't actually read the manga that this movie is based off, so maybe I'm at fault here, but I just could not connect to any of these characters. None of the drama I saw was really effective. The most interesting aspect of Manji gets off very early in the film, which I thought was a real shame. And all these characters that keep showing up, characters come running in constantly, and most of them die within 10 minutes regardless of what side of the conflict they're on. And I don't know, I just couldn't really get into it. I couldn't keep track. And that's not to say I don't enjoy the action. The action is impeccable, but it's also 2.5 hours of watching people fight, and no matter how cool that fight is, it's just not going to keep your attention for 2 hours if you don't actually care about any of the people on screen. I seem to be in the minority here though. When I look it up, people seem to have unanimously loved it, and it's entirely possible that I just missed something while watching, but ultimately, for as fun and wonderful as it looks, Blade of the Immortal just did not do anything for me personally. And then we have Downrange. Oh boy. Downrange won me over on its base concept, which is that a group of youngsters out driving together, carpooling, managed to get stuck on a deserted desert road thanks to a sniper hiding in the trees who's just waiting to get a good shot at them. I love concepts like these. I love single location thrillers with one immediate threat and watching people survive. I loved Buried, I love Phone Booth. I'm really fond of, well, mostly the second half of Cujo. You get my point. All of those things I really love. So I had to see this because usually these one location thrillers are like in one closed space where you're in immediate danger. Here it's like a ginormous open space, you just don't have the option of running. And I thought that was really interesting. So it's a bit of a shame that Downrange has absolutely no idea what the fuck it's doing. Okay, that might sound harsh, but Downrange starts off decently enough and very, very quickly comes off as someone who insists on playing with every single toy in his toy box. This director, I forget his name, is obviously trying to do a lot with this film and trying to put a lot of ideas into one story, but the problem is that it ultimately just hurts what is a perfectly simple premise that sets itself up for perfect tension on its own. We get ridiculous melodrama halfway through where everybody suddenly has a more tragic past. We get weird attempts at symbolism. We get helicopter shots. We get shots of the sniper, which in this kind of movie I would personally say is a no-no. We get random animals. We get swooping shots. We get these weird whoosh effects whenever we pan over something. We get color filters. It's just throwing everything but the kitchen sink at you, hoping that eventually one of these things will shock you. And ultimately, it just becomes laughable as a result. The best way to describe watching Downrange is to imagine you're at a pizza place, and you see that on the menu there is a choose your own toppings pizza. So you order the pizza and the guy asks what you want on it, and you say, surprise me. And at first you see him put simple things on, like, okay, cheese, tomato sauce, some ham, yes, this is looking like a pretty decent standard pizza. And then he starts grabbing giant handfuls of every single edible thing in the pizzeria. Pineapple, shrimp, potatoes, salad, every single thing, no matter how good they are separately, all piled on top of the same goddamn pizza. And just as you think he's done, he takes off his shoe and his hat and slams those on too. And you're looking at this, remembering that it used to be a perfectly edible pizza, and now you feel like you have to eat it anyway because you already paid. That's Downrange. I hate to be so harsh on what is obviously a bit of a playground movie. Someone just getting to try out all their ideas. I really do, but I just don't see anything irredeemable about Downrange. It's just a complete mess of styles that completely forgets what it set out to do in the beginning. I'm sorry, Downrange crew. I just couldn't get behind this one. Then we move on to something a little more artsy-fartsy, because this next movie is French, and that automatically means art movie, right? The movie is called Chien, which translates to dog, and is about a man named Jacques who is honestly a little bit pathetic and basically just goes with whatever other people tell him life is supposed to be. He starts the movie by getting thrown out of the house by his wife, his son doesn't give a shit, and very soon he also ends up losing his job, essentially rendering him homeless. The only person that is interested in taking him in is the dog trainer owner of a kennel that ends up treating him way more like a dog than he does a human. If this sounds bizarre, it's only because it is. Dog is a very, very strange, dark comedy that it's impossible not to laugh at, and also impossible not to scratch your head at. It's very French, not in that it's incomprehensible or anything. It's more like it really utterly refuses to answer any of your questions or give you any pointers as to what this story is actually about. But it's still strangely interesting to see just how low this guy's life actually goes, how much he's treated like a dog, and putting into perspective how we actually treat dogs. It's definitely a movie worth watching, but it will ultimately be up to you to decide what the hell the movie is actually about. It gives you no answers, and I don't think it should. Definitely check Dog out. And finally we have I was about to say the final girls, that's not true. And next up we have Tragedy Girls, the story of two best friendsies high school girlfriends who really want to be internet famous, you know, get all the followers on Instagram, YouTube, all that good stuff. They decide to do so by reporting on and basically profiting from fatal tragedies around their sleepy little town. Tragedies that they themselves engineer, of course. It starts off with what looks like fatal accidents, but once they get on the track of a serial killer, they take over his work and really ramp up the body count to get those followers. And scarily enough, it works. But as they get more and more internet famous, can the two keep their friendship up? Now, like a lot of you probably are, I was instantly worried when I heard about this movie that we were going to deal with one of these cautionary tales about how all social media is evil and everybody who follows it are sheep that will just click on the first most shocking thing they see, and thankfully that is not the case. Ultimately, Tragedy Girls is a really fun subversive slasher movie that just happens to have a social media angle. It never tries to make a statement, except for maybe one scene where the girls get called out for their behavior, and that's it. Tragedy Girls often gets described as a combination between Scream and Heathers, and while I haven't actually seen the latter, which I do plan to fix someday, I can definitely see the comparisons to Scream. It's a modern, quite fun, very self-aware slasher movie that is also very referential to other slasher movies, but never to such a degree that it becomes a burden or hinders newer viewers from enjoying it. And it's just colorful and wonderfully parodies both slasher tropes and high school movie tropes, and actually some of those I found to be the funniest. There are some really funny moments where these two obviously extremely psychotic girls succumb to every bad high school movie cliche, high school movie girl cliche, and it is just a hoot to watch. I won't give too much away because this movie is actually pretty good at shaking things up every now and then, but I will say that if you've been looking for a modern slasher movie that plays a little bit with the formula, Tragedy Girls is both funny, gory, colorful, and very fun to watch. So this one is definitely recommended for any horror fans out there. So there you have it. Those are the 9 movies I watched during this year's Copenhagen Pix Film Festival. Did any of these films sound especially interesting to you, or have you seen any out of the ordinary movies recently that you'd like to recommend people? Then let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe for many more reviews of movies, comic books, games, and all sorts of other nerdy goodies. You can also follow me on plenty of social medias, like the Tragedy Girls, and there are links to those in the description below. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye!